Let me tell you a few things about the past. My past feast, the first time I went, my first experience of attending the Feast of Tabernacles. We all remember that first time. Things might get a little fuzzy when we try to remember the 10th or 20th or 30th, but that first one is special. And in fact, how many have, you're going to hear this question again, I'm sure, with Charles Gross and some of the other ministers coming in from the other areas, but how many have attended at least 10 feasts? Okay, almost everybody. How about 20? 30? Yeah, I can tell from the color of your hair if you got any. 40? Anybody here? 40? Wow, okay. Okay, here's a 50. No, not me either. We have one. So how many, was there only one? This is like on TV. You can't see anything for the lights hardly. How many years have you been coming, sir? 51? 61. My, wow. Oh, said 61. I can't do the math that quick. At any rate. Well, you know, this is my 44th, but congratulations on your anniversary. Every year you come, you know, this is an anniversary of attending the Feast of Tabernacles. So congratulations, and hope, what do they say, many more to come. So, Mr. Watson asked yesterday for the show of hands of the first feast, but you'll probably get that question asked again as some of the ministers come in, maybe Wayne Hendricks, Charles Gross, and the others. So just bear with them, put your hands up again. It's an opportunity. Actually, the first feast was not my most enjoyable. Because I hadn't been in the church long and I hadn't set aside any money. So when it came time to go, I didn't have any money to go. So I kept that first feast alone at home and reading about all the stuff I was missing. I guess you could say that's memorable too, because I remember that. But the best feast was the one that I had the fondest memories of, and that was my first in attendance with the church. That was 1967, first time I attended. So that was quite an experience to go. I'd read about it for a year. And as it got closer, I was getting all excited about the things that were going to be going on, the opportunities, not the least of which, of course, was to be able to learn more. I had lots of questions. That's how I came in contact with the church. I had questions that other ministers said, well, don't ask that. And that turned me off. I wanted to know. And even if the minister said, I'm not sure about what this prophecy means, at least that was an honest answer. And that's what the church provided. It was also called the Feast of Booths. Feast of Tabernacles, Feast of Booths. I learned that referred to the temporary dwelling, the temporary condition that we're in. Even living on earth as a human being, we're here temporarily. And that's what Tabernacles was picturing. We were living in temporary quarters of some kind, whether it be a tent or whatever. Now, I also read about reports of what the local people thought about the feast people. Some of them called us the feast people. And I learned about what the local people thought about the feast people. That we made an impact on the locals in more than one way. But we were well regarded. Actually, the first feast I went to, I think there was over 7,000 people there, and it was a smaller community. So, but published articles about the feast people were very complimentary. They were good. And, they considered us happy people, and they enjoyed being around us. We were a pleasant group to be with. Nobody wants to be around grumpy people, do they? At least till after you have your second cup of coffee, maybe, whatever. They also described the church people as being patient and polite. And these are things that I had read in advance, and when I went to the feast, I experienced this. With such large groups coming into a smaller area, especially 7,000, 7,600 people, that could really overwhelm some of the local businesses, like the restaurants. You have crowds come in that they're not used to, even though they want to serve you. It really puts them on the spot to try to serve everybody as fast as they would like, and it tries the patience of everybody. But the church people were patient. They were patient to understand this. And the restaurants and all of the bowling alleys or wherever we went, they really did appreciate that. They described us as being kind people, peaceful people. We didn't get rowdy and cause a commotion like some of the conventions that had been to the area. The classic view of a convention is not good. Drunks and bad behavior and all kinds of stuff. But we were viewed very well by the locals. And that we were long-suffering to understand when they were overwhelmed with a group of people coming in. They were happy to see us come. The feast people were good for business, really good for business. We dropped a lot of money there. But, we were polite. We didn't leave penny tips on the table. In fact, we were noted for being rather generous. And even when things didn't work out as well and somebody was a little grumpy because they were overwhelmed, we were patient and we understood, that it's a bad day and anybody can have a bad day. But our conduct probably planted a seed of curiosity in some people's mind. Some people, because of that conduct, probably caused them to look into this thing that we call this way of life, and caused them to look into the Bible to see what the truth was, because the truth does matter. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if I won't ask for a show of hands, but if there aren't people here at the feast who are here, who have come into this way because somebody put that curiosity in their mind and they looked into things and found out what the truth was. When I think about a true follower of Christ, one who's allowing the Holy Spirit to influence and lead, I always think of Galatians 5:22. You probably know that one well. That was one of those that we memorized. 5:22 and 23, the fruit of the Spirit scripture. Let's go ahead and turn there. Galatians 5:22 and 23. We'll start reading in 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. Now, that's the 1611 King's English. I've got another quote here from the New King James Version, and a lot of them will give you a better grasp of the language. That reads, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, we understand that, joy, peace, long-suffering, we understand that, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. Now, does that sound a little bit familiar? Does that sound a little bit like some of those characteristics that the feast people were exhibiting was some of those traits, some of those behavior things, patterns? If the famous quote, if the shoe fits, well, I think the shoe fits there. When Christ was asked what the greatest commandment was, I don't remember whether it was a Pharisee or who he asked him, but somebody asked him that, he said, he summed it up with just two. Just two. Let's read that in Matthew 22, verse 30, starting in verse 37. Matthew 22, verse 37. Excuse me. Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Jesus summed it up with just two things. Love toward God, love toward neighbor. He was good at making things simple. The Pharisees were good at complicating things. Jesus said love toward neighbor. Neighbor means the people we interact with, the people we meet. Here, especially here, because, we're here representing something. We're here for a lot of reasons, and people look at us and judge a lot of things about our beliefs and whether they give it a chance to understand or not. So, I learned something about the book of Jude. That's a little short book just before Revelation. Let's go to the book of Jude, verse 12. I'll read something here. The feasts are called love feasts. And I need to turn there myself to get there. It's such a small book, it's easy to miss, isn't it? These thin papers for India ink. Okay, in verse 12 it says, "These are spots in your feast of charity," or love, as the charity, as we know, means love, and all the modern translations call that love, of charity. "When they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear, clouds they are without water, carried about with winds, trees whose fruit withers, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots." He's making a contrast here, but it's his term of the use of what he called the feast is what I homed in on. He was making a contrast about some who were not behaving well. They were not of good report. There's always a few people anywhere who are going to act bad, not act up to the standard that they should. And a few people were setting bad examples then, so much so that Jude described them as being spots or blemishes on the feast. What I learned from the book of Jude was that there's always somebody there, but it was what he called the feast. He said he called them love feast. And I think that was the only place I could find in the Bible where it was described that way. And the feast are distinctively Christian. They were keeping the feast with a new spirit. They were feasting with the fruit of the Spirit. So Jude called them love feast. Not love as the world knows it, but the love that Christ would have us exhibit or show. The fruit of the Spirit, as we just read in Galatians 5. I've heard somebody say that we should consider ourselves emissaries. This goes back a way, but it still applies today. We should consider ourselves in the Christian life as emissaries or ambassadors of God's way. So our conduct does matter. It especially matters here. I've heard the question asked, if someone accused you of being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict? So we are told to have love one for another, not love as this world knows it, but the love that comes as fruit of the Spirit. I'm going to read a few scriptures here, and I'm going to read them kind of quickly just to get the theme. So I'm going to read Galatians 5:13. 1 Thessalonians 4:9, 1 John 3:11, 1 John 4:7, and Romans 13:8. I'm just going to read them quickly, and some are from modern translations. "For you, brethren, have been called to liberty, only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. But concerning brotherly love, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves are taught by God to love one another. Because this is the word which was given to you from the first, that we are able to have love one for another. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God." Romans 13:8, in the conclusion there, "Owe no man anything save to love one another, for he that loves his neighbor has fulfilled the law." I think I see what Jude was getting at, what he was talking about. The feast people, then and now, were filled with God's Spirit. And the fruit of the Spirit, the first fruit of the Spirit was listed was love, and then all of the other fruits that come from that, from love, showing love, the joy, the peace, the long-suffering, the gentleness, the kindness. So I think Jude was really onto something, because as I said, this is the only place I could find it quite described this way. After all, the priesthood had been changed. We had a new high priest in heaven. A new spirit had been given, or the Spirit had been given. I know that because Jesus said he was going to send it, then he did send it. They were keeping a uniquely Christian feast, not just a bunch of ceremony that perhaps they didn't even understand. It's uniquely Christian, not Jewish. And just as today, we are not keeping a Jewish feast. We are keeping God's feast. So my fellow feast people, I kind of like that. Feast people. We're the feast people. If someone should ask you, how's your love life going? Give them something new to think about.